It's been 20 years since the terrorist attacks on 9/11. Where were you that day? I can tell you that I was sitting in English class at James F. Dowdy School. I can tell you about the fear and uncertainty that I felt, as I'm sure most 8th graders felt as we sat glued to the TV. That same fear and uncertainty that I'm sure the rest of the world felt. But despite that fear, despite that uncertainty, the attacks that morning meant that for some, it was time to go to work. I'm Master Sergeant Andy Sinclair, and this is episode 55 of the MAINEiac radio show. Colonel Ian Gillis, Vice Wing Commander of the 101st Air Refueling Wing, had been training his entire career in the unfortunate event that tragedy would strike. And it was one of the MAINEiacs that took to the skies in rapid response.
At the time, I was the Chief of Air Crew Scheduling. We had just come off a drill weekend where we'd had a large exercise. That morning, we had some training scheduled down in the comm flight, so I was actually down in the comm flight classroom. And I remember the giant voice announcements with calling people. And the class I was in, a couple of people got called out. I didn't really pay much attention to it, right? People need to be in offices and things like that. And then all of a sudden I got called out. So I went back to the scheduling office, and we had a TV in the office, and it was, showing the towers that had already been hit. And, at the time, I remember thinking, wow, they're really playing this exercise up. They're piping in CCTV with, this video on it. That's really realistic. I thought the exercise was over. And then, somebody broke the news to me that the towers had been hit. And we immediately, went into action. We had several jets already airborne that day, one that was going TDY for a business effort that got diverted in to give fuel. We had another aircraft that was just doing a local AR that had gotten diverted into New York to help. And then we had 3 jets that we generated that day, and we were looking for crews to put on those jets. And I paired up with another member from the squadron that was there that day, and we generated an aircraft. At that point, as you're out pre-flighting the aircraft, getting it ready to go, you're kind of cut off from everything. You don't hear what's going on and stuff like that. And so our crew chief on the ground was in a pickup truck, and he would turn the radio up and key his mic so that we could hear what was going on. Of the 3 jets that generated that day, one took off pretty quickly, and then another one took off, and then we got called to come back into operations. And we traded in our peacetime communications kit for a wartime kit. And that, when you train for that kind of stuff all the time, and then, when it actually happens, and it happens over your own country, as they say, it gets real. And you think, wow, what's going on? As we were doing that, we got the call to launch our jet. So we ran down and scrambled and started started our day flying that day.
It's probably safe to say that for anybody who has deployed before or been in a hairy situation, your anxiety and your adrenaline and your excitement and the uncertainty, all of that is everyone kind of experiences that. The difference between kind of what you had gone through and your coworkers, your fellow MAINEiacs went through, versus what that would be like nowadays, is another added emotion, exponentially greater back then, is fear. And the reason why I say that is because one of the primary means of communication and getting your information was through CCTV or through word of mouth and hearing about it. So the fear of the unknown and not knowing what's going on, versus now I can pick up my phone and see what's going on overseas instantly.
Oh yeah. None of us had smartphones.
Yeah.
Right. When you deploy into a combat environment, you have an expectation, right? of what's going to go on and what you might face over there. But when you talk about attacks on our own soil using civilian airliners, that was a whole new thing. Nobody anticipated it. Nobody understood what it was going to be about. And you're talking about not even in a deployed environment. This is our homeland, and that was a difficult transition to make. We made it very fast, and I don't really know that we really thought too much about it in the moment. Until we got airborne. When we, it's standard practice to ask for taxi clearance and takeoff clearance and all that kind of stuff, day in and day out. When we called for taxi clearance that day, the controller said, "You're cleared all taxiways, cleared any runway, cleared to contact tactical."
What does that last part mean?
So, in other words, the controller was telling us that we could just immediately contact our tactical controller. We heard that, and we taxied out. And normal habit is to switch to tower as you get to the end of the runway and ask for clearance to take off. And we got down to the end, and we switched to tower, and we said, "Hey, Maine whatever, requesting number one, ready to go." And the controller came across again, somewhat annoyed this time, and said, "Hey, you're cleared any runway, cleared immediate departure, contact tactical."
Which is something you guys never heard that before.
Never heard that before, right? You never get, essentially we were told you can have the airfield, do whatever you want with it, and you're cleared unrestricted to go take off and do whatever you want. Rick Thompson was the other pilot on the jet, and I remember kind of looking at him with that kind of bewildered look on my face. Did we just get cleared to do whatever we want? And we did. We took off, immediately switched to the GCI controller, the ground control intercept, Huntress, and they vectored us down towards Boston, and we serviced the fighters that were protecting Logan. It starts to get even realer at that point, because those fighters are essentially shadowing civilian airliners, and their orders are, if the airliner diverts off of their approach into Boston, you're supposed to shoot them down.
That's crazy.
So we were weapons free over the United States, and again, never before in our history, right?
And not again, not since then.
And not since then, thankfully.
Right.
As we were sitting in the orbit taking care of our fighters, one of the jets that had already been airborne that day and had landed at McGuire to get gas was on its way back to Bangor. And of course, because they had their peacetime communications kit, they were being identified as not squawking appropriately. And one of our fighters that we were servicing got sent to go identify them.
Wow.
And I remember getting on our local common frequency and saying, "Hey, Grinder, you're about to have company. Do whatever they say. You're not squawking the right squawk right now."
Right.
And of course, they go up and they find the main tail flash and identify the crew, and away they go. But still a little
wild.
Scary at that point, right? Because we're weapons free across the United States, and our guys have been identified as a potential target. And from where we were well away from New York. We could see the smoke.
Really? In Massachusetts or from?
Yeah. From where we were, in our orbit area. We were not quite on Boston. We were a little south and west of Boston is where they'd set us up. And you could see the smoke on the horizon.
Wow. That's crazy.
Yeah.
So at that point, like that one day had shaped everything that you know now, right?
Changed the face of the way we do business and how we employ and deploy. Definitely. From that point forward, we set up, we ended up doing what we call combat air patrols over major cities for quite a while. This unit participated in that. We were flying sorties throughout the night, almost constantly having an airplane airborne. We were responsible for, early on, we did a little bit over Boston, but then New York kind of became our emphasis, and we spent a lot of time overhead New York. And from that point forward, we had a Homeland Defense tanker on alert. And that number has shifted with the number of jets we've had on alert, but that it's been a constant battle rhythm since then.
I can't imagine what was going through your guys' mind especially when you got up in the plane, you saw that smoke on the horizon. Like, I think probably shock is probably an understatement. I mean,
yeah, aviators have a tendency to compartmentalize stuff. I mean, you latch on to the most important thing that sits in front of you, and you take care of that, and then you move on. And we tend to take things that don't fit in that immediate need, and we box them up and we push them aside. And I'd say there was a lot of that day. Just not being able to wrap your brain around it. All right, I've got a job to do. I've got to take care of my receivers. We'll box that up. We'll get to it later. And it took a while to unpack that box, most definitely. And I'm not sure to this day if I really have been able to fully wrap my brain around it. We've just kind of moved on.
And that's what I feel like that's what they pound into our brains, like your basic training courses and initial trainings is that, like, because there's nothing else you can do. You can either break down and it affects the mission, affects your coworkers, or you press on and let that training kick in, muscle memory, I guess. But especially for you guys, the amount of training that the pilots have to do, and it's wild to think that, because I remember that day as well, but you never really stopped and thought about, you just knew the job was getting done. I think one of the points or goals in this podcast is to make people aware, especially the ones who weren't even born yet, the severity of what you guys kind of went through at that time, especially where technology isn't the way it is now, where you can get, like I said earlier, communication quick, fast, and really, really quick and easy across the board. But how did it affect not necessarily the rest of the wing, but how did that affect the rest of ops at that time? Like, what was everybody else doing who wasn't flying?
So by the time we got back and landed, we were already putting jets on alert. We were cocking jets on, putting crews into crew rest, because we just didn't know what was going to happen next. And we kind of maintained that rhythm of having jets set ready to launch at a moment's notice, and not just one, but I think we probably had 4 or 5 sitting cocked on, ready to take off at a moment's notice with a crew designated against it. And we had varying levels of that. We had crews actually on base ready to go. We had crews kind of queued up on a short notice kind of pager type thing, and then crews even ready to replace those should they get used, and crew rested and stuff like that. And then, like I said, we kind of moved into those combat air patrols where we were launching, basically every 6 hours to refuel fighters in an air patrol over New York, just looking for that next threat coming in.
Was active duty a part of that as well? Were they?
So the active duty showed up 4 or 5 days, I think, after the 11th. And they stayed with us for a while. They were the initial ones that started doing the combat air patrols. We kind of raised our hand to AMC and said, hey, you got 10 tankers sitting here already. You just brought somebody in from McConnell, with 6 more jets. We can do their work. Mm-hmm. We're here. We want to be part of the fight. Mm-hmm. And probably about a month, it's quite a while ago, obviously, the McConnell folks, picked up and deployed. Mm-hmm. I probably can't tell you where they deployed now because I can't remember.
Right.
I know that it was, overseas. Mm-hmm. I don't know if they were in Europe or if they went further in. Mm-hmm. And then the show was ours. The alerts and all the combat air patrols that were launched out of here were all main tails.
Sounds like a busy time for everybody.
Very busy time. And as a scheduler, we had to manage all of that. Long days trying to fit all the pieces together and keep the operation going. And we would, as a scheduler, we would try and get in the mix every once in a while to, frankly, give the other folks a break and, get away from the office a little bit too. Mm-hmm. I remember flying a lot of nights. And my parents lived less than 5 minutes from the base here. I live about 20 minutes from the base. So I would quite frequently just go over to their place and for lack of a better term, crash. Mm-hmm. And my mother would wake up in the morning and find me curled up on the couch in front of the fireplace, or sometimes I was just stretched out in front of the fire.
Just trying to get some sleep.
Just trying to get some sleep.
Decompress a little bit.
Yeah. And she'd say, "Hey, when do you have to be back to work?" And I kind of look at my watch, and I got another hour, Mom. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And she'd shake me awake, in time to get back to work. So it really took us from being a guard unit that operates Monday through Friday to an integral part of the nation's defense that operates 24/7, 365. That was the beginning of our real, op tempo here at home station.
For everybody too, right? I mean, it's funny. I just talked to a gentleman yesterday down in Augusta. He was enlisted at the time, and he when the towers got hit, and he got augmented over here to help with security as a part of the Brewer Infantry Unit, and and I had always heard stories about that. By the time I joined, there were none of them left. The stories weren't always great. They were always the Army destroyed our Humvees and they destroyed this and destroyed that. But the fact that it was kind of neat to me, appealing to me, that you had this purple fighting force that was here to defend the base, and that was kind of cool. And I've never actually met somebody. I don't think I've ever met somebody that was a soldier that was a part of that unit until yesterday. So that was kind of neat. But so it seems to be for everybody. And I mean, there were a lot of people that were mobilized, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and again, I probably should have studied some of the facts and figures before I sat down. But after that initial towers fall and we kind of stand up and start doing that 24/7 ops, we had just tons of people on orders supporting that. Mm-hmm. And the base was active, 24/7. It wasn't like, you'd roll in at 3:00 in the morning, this place would be quiet. No, we were recovering a jet, maybe launching a jet, putting gas on a jet. There was stuff going on. Mm-hmm. And then you kind of fast forward to 2003 when we started to posture to enter Iraq again and start that effort. The amount of C-17s that came through just ramped up huge, trying to prepare for that action. We kind of went from the combat air patrol piece to the air bridge piece. Mm-hmm. And we transitioned right again into 24/7, 365, and even more intense. When we were doing the caps, we were launching, maybe 3-4 sorties a day. The jet would take off and go spend, 4 or 5 hours in a cap and then come back. In the air bridge, we were launching 17, 20 sorties a day, and it would take off, go hit a receiver, 100,000-pound offload maybe, and then land back here. And that cycle might be as quick as less than 2 hours. Jet hits the ground, put gas on it, and launch it again. Really, we didn't start slowing from that pace until 2007 timeframe, 2008, and then it kind of starts slowing down. And about that time, we converted also as an E model unit. A lot of times they didn't want an E model over in the AOR because only guardmen could fly it. We were the only ones qualified in that airframe. So we were kind of kept on the periphery a lot in the AOR. in that time frame, in the 2008 time frame, we converted to the R model. And that's what everybody else flies. Active duty, reserve, and at the Guard at that point was flying it too. And so we see, as that air bridge piece kind of comes to a close, we see the AOR piece start to bloom up. And that really didn't die down that much until the last 2 or 3 years. So if you go pre 9/11, we're kind of this Guard unit doing our training thing. Post 9/11, we're operational, and we're at a sprint pace. And I think we probably sprinted for 10 plus years. And then I think maybe we dropped to a marathon pace. And it isn't until the last year or two that the unit's actually been able to step back. And we're still not I like to say we're still not the sleepy little Guard unit that does nothing but training, but we're closer to that than we ever were. But as Colonel Barassa says, we've never taken a knee.
Right.
Even under COVID, we didn't take a knee. We continue to train. We continue to do our Homeland Defense mission. We continue to deploy folks. So it's changed. It definitely changed.
And that was going to be my next question, was that the you guys, DSGs, full-timers, doesn't matter. I would imagine a lot of you, and I could be wrong, I'm trying to rack my brain, a lot of you, that was probably your first time, not going from 0 to 60, but going from 0 to 1,000 and staying, like you just said, at that sprinting pace for as long as you guys did. I mean, that's got to be wild. And that's got to take a toll on airmen and MAINEiacs, their families. I mean, I can't even imagine.
Yeah, definitely did.
Civilian employers. I mean, wow. Yeah,
big impact overall, and I don't know that we'll ever know the real impact, because there's so much of it that are second and third order effects. Certainly, my kids grew up post 9/11. I had a daughter that was born in '99, and the rest of my kids were born after 9/11. And they don't know anything but. But I would say that, my father being in the Guard and me being in the Guard are two completely different animals. He grew up in the Korea, Vietnam, Cold War era, never having really left Bangor per se. I mean, TDYs, yes, but not like we do. And even, post Desert Storm, he remarked that as I was a first lieutenant, I'd had more TDYs and gone more places than he did in his entire 34-year career. And then to go post 9/11, it's almost as dramatic a shift there from the post Desert Storm to the post 9/11 era in TDYs and operational missions and that kind of stuff.
Well, that to me, that's the kind of the beauty of I don't know, is there even a word? The adaptiveness or the adapting ability that we have in the Guard to go from being, like you said, kind of a sleepy little Guard unit, to be able to go and fight tonight at a moment's notice. And the fact that we do train to the point where you guys were kind of on autopilot, no pun intended, when all that had kind of gone down, it just goes to show you that that's the importance behind training. The same thing on the range when crap hits the fan in real life, you want to be able to know your sports acronyms and get that weapon firing as fast as you can. That's wild to me. That's what's cool. And so no one likes to do it. No one likes to train and be ready to go. But when it happens, like in that situation, thinking about the impact that it had, not only on the base but the families and again civilian employers, that's crazy. And commendable to everybody that was able to step up to that, and everybody after that rose their right hand because they wanted to fight and do their part type of thing. That's pretty crazy. Which kind of leads into my next topic. Be given the position that you're in now and seeing how much we have changed and had to adapt, that same word, adapt, over the last 20 years, you've seen a lot, and you've been through a lot, and you've been to a lot of places. And you've seen how the MAINEiacs operate and how the whole dynamic has shifted to in some cases deploying more than our counterparts with active duty and reservists. I've got buddies who are active duty that have the 15 years in, like myself, that haven't deployed yet. I mean, that's wild to me. But again, so it's neat to see how we are, how involved we are with today's fight. And for you in your position, you see that exponentially more than most of us do. So what is it like for you, Colonel, to see where we've shifted over the last 20 years, to see the overall change?
That's a tough one. I think as I look back, obviously I started in the Cold War era, and there's a pride in what we do. We always wanted to be the best at whatever we did, and as MAINEiacs, and I think post 9/11, we just kind of continued that mantra, that desire to be the best and do the best we could. And so when you take a MAINEiac and put them in a deployed environment, they're not just looking to do the job and go back to their rack at night. They're looking to leave it better than they found it. They're looking to do more and improve the process and do stuff like that. So, for our unit in particular, I think it was an opportunity to showcase what we're all about. We talk about the tradition of excellence, and the MAINEiac symbol is known throughout the world, right? And I think the unit pivoted a little bit and got into that mindset of being in that deployed environment, but we took our traditions and we just took them with us when we deployed. Mm-hmm. That ability to go out and do more and be the best we can be. I think a lot of the unit members look forward to deploying. They want that opportunity to shine and to show what they're capable of. And it's a growth opportunity. You as you say, you do all that training right back here, and you're like, can I really do it? Mm-hmm. Well, deploying is an opportunity for you to show, I did learn what I was supposed to learn in tech school, and I can do my job in that deployed environment. So, I don't think that our unit at its core changed. I think we just adapted to what the new reality is. Mm-hmm. And we took those core tenets of what we always have been, and we took them on the road with us, and we're able to showcase what we do.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I think that it's a testament to how everybody kind of came together too. I mean, because again, when a disaster, or something as big as the attacks on 9/11 happened, everybody came together, and the amount of the number of cogs and spinning wheels that had to make everything work that's what's mind-boggling. It's enough to make someone go crazy. But
yeah, you talk about on 9/11, and again, I may get the statistic wrong, but I believe it was a 98% recall rate.
Wow.
So we had 98% of the wing reported for duty. Most of those people reported for duty before they ever got a phone call. Mm-hmm. They saw the news, they packed their bag, and they came to work. That's a MAINEiac. Mm-hmm. They see a problem, they want to help, they want to fix it, and it's just what we do. Mm-hmm. So that's who we are at heart.
Yeah, that's enough. That's got to be pretty. It's got to make you guys proud, especially again the position you've been in, but as long as you've been in, to see how everybody's kind of changed and been affected by that. That's pretty wild. With the career that you've had, what's that like? Looking back on that and how 9/11 has changed your experiences. I mean,
well, honestly, it's hard to at this point in my career imagine not. Mm-hmm. Right. I mean, I've 33 years. Post 9/11 is more than half of my career. So it's become the new normal, mm-hmm. I would say. As I look back on my career, I used to say that I could see 3 different distinct changes in the world. I think it's almost 4 now. Cold War, where it's the big adversary and and the guard will only get called if if the Russians start rolling across the Europe. We'll get called, and we're a reserve. And then Desert Storm. I remember packing my bags a couple of times as a young enlisted troop. Hey, can you go? Yeah, I can go. And I, called back that afternoon with my bags packed. Oh, some other unit has already taken the position. But that post-Desert Storm era, we were kind of a tactical reserve. Not getting used a whole lot, but kind of there if we needed to fill in for the active duty. And then post 9/11, we become an operational reserve or almost an operational entity. Still the notion is that the Guard is a reserve and only called on when needed, but more operationalized. In other words, you get called more often. And honestly, I think we were just part of the total force at that point, because as I look back, we were constantly in motion.
Mm-hmm.
If we were a reserve, reserves don't get used for 20 years straight.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Right. And so I think we were part of the operational component necessarily. So, and then here we are. As we see the drawdown in Afghanistan and Iraq, the ops tempo has kind of fallen back, and maybe we are getting more into that reserve here to help if necessary kind of thing. But I'm not sure that we've really settled on what this new dynamic is going to be yet.
And that, again, that's got to take a toll on everybody, because being the Guard, we're doing our homes. We're doing our home station here in Bangor, Maine. Our mission, day-to-day ops. We're doing our state mission. With natural disasters, God forbid something like that happens again. So we have that's expected of us. We have your patrolling missions that are CONUS that you guys participated in, which is wild. And then the cherry on top, you guys are doing the same thing. You guys are flying overseas once the deployment taskings are coming out. I mean, it's crazy. It's the fact that you guys went we've been doing that for as long as we've been doing it at the caliber of excellence that we've been doing that at is just wild. That's crazy. And it's a good time. This is the third podcast in a row I've said this, but what an exciting time to be a MAINEiac, to be a part of that tradition.
Oh, it is.
To see that. It's crazy.
Yeah, definitely.
From your perspective, how did the events of 9/11 impact the rest of the wing? Like, what was that like?
From Desert Storm to 9/11, I think what you saw is the operational type deployments were for no-fly zones in Bosnia and Kosovo, and Northern Watch, Southern Watch for Iraq, and they were very aircrew maintenance centric, with some support folks that went with them, but that aviation package. And then as we kind of get rolling post 9/11, you have those aviation packages that go out, but you also have all of the expeditionary combat support folks. The cops doing detainee moves, and base defense services folks going out and setting up, services for deployed environments. Personnelists going out and doing the integration of folks and in processing, out processing, and that kind of stuff. Finance, contractors. I mean, everybody kind of got involved in supporting operations overseas. And that's evolved, but I think, again, going back to when I first started out here, we never thought that would ever happen. And if it did, the mindset was the whole wing would pick up and go somewhere. And post 9/11, it was not uncommon for one person to leave from a squadron or a shop and be, I don't want to say alone, but be the sole MAINEiac at that FOB or at that base. And that's kind of continued. I think the pace has somewhat slowed, With these reserve component mobilization periods, it kind of gets a little bit more predictable than it was at the beginning. But we're still doing that kind of stuff, and we're still the aviation package is still being tasked to go out. It's getting more predictable, and the time between deployments I think is expanding a little bit. But we still have folks doing it. Right now we have a few folks overseas right now, and we're about to enter that RCP period, and we'll have more people going out the door. We'll have our aviation package here heading out, and they'll be gone for a 60-day, 90-day time frame. So it's still, MAINEiacs are still on the road, still doing great things in that deployed environment.
What's it like for you being the vice wing commander and seeing that nowadays with the operations? You kind of briefly touched on what it was like post 9/11, but maybe a little bit of sadness isn't the right word, but as a rated 06, I don't get to go do what I used to go do. Mm-hmm. Nobody wants an old colonel in the AOR. So some of it's I wish I could still go and do. Some of it's concern. I'm concerned for putting people in harm's way. And maybe that's why I push a little harder for some training to make sure that we get the right training to folks so that they're prepared for when they get overseas. And a sense of pride, knowing that folks that I trained with or deployed with are still going out and doing the mission. And with a sense of purpose. I mean, we're part of the nation's defense. Mm-hmm. And without us, the nation isn't as secure. So that's maybe where that sense of pride comes from. But yeah, I mean, it's going to leave you feeling a little uncertain, a little unweary, given that position you're in now, where you are sending people out the door. Whereas, so if you send me to, we'll just say Kuwait tomorrow, and it's been years since you've been to Kuwait, you'd probably feel better about sending me to Kuwait if you had just been to Kuwait and you know what to expect of your people.
Yeah.
Right. So, the famous quote from Lieutenant Colonel Hal Moore to the Vietnam War in that book, We Were Soldiers Once and Young, when he was upset when the reporter had asked him, why are you upset? And he said, because he didn't get to, he's not experiencing what his guys did, experience on the ground, and that he, a lot of them didn't make it home, and he wasn't one of them. Those are pretty powerful, So that's kind of what I kind of attribute to it now, is that it's got to be odd for you guys to send people out the door when you yourselves you can't see what.
Yeah, that's just it, and I guess that's it's tough to express that, but we're, as senior leaders, we're all confident in our ability to be able to go out and do, and so you feel that desire to still be a part of that, and I guess maybe I've been that person that wants to lead from the front, and when I can't deploy with my folks, you almost feel like you're not part of the team anymore, and it's a little scary, because if you're over there, then you know what's going on, and you feel like maybe you have a sense of being able to help and support the folks, and what you got to do is just trust in their training and the education that you've provided them, that they're going to be able to do it. So it is different. It's tough, especially for those of us that have deployed so much to not be doing it anymore. Doesn't quite feel right.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And those leaders, those, senior NCOs or young officers that come back who did lead a team, in your absence where you couldn't be there, that's going to be a testament to you guys to know the current state of affairs that we've been in for the last 20 years, and that adaptive change that the MAINEiacs have undergone. To see that's got to just add to that pride bank, to sit back and say, holy crap, I kind of I've done my job right.
Yeah,
I guess is the best way to put it. So
yeah,
it's going to be
definitely
a good feeling. So, Yeah, we covered a lot, sir, and I appreciate your time. Is there anything you'd like to add? Anything you want to talk about in regards to the 20-year anniversary?
I think it'll be interesting. I think that come September 11th, that's Drill Weekend for us. We're going to have all of our MAINEiac family here. I'm not sure what emotions are going to come out that day. It's going to be a somber day. It's going to be a heavy day. Just looking back on all that's occurred in the last 20 years and the cost to the nation, it's going to be a time for reflection. And much like I think December 7th has been for World War II vets, September 11th is for our current veterans. It's a day we're not going to forget. It's a day that we're going to continue to pay attention to. I don't like the term memorialize because I don't know that it's worthy of that, but recognize what that did for the nation and what that's caused in the preceding years. So I don't think you're going to see a lot of fanfare here on base, a lot of pomp and circumstance. I think it's going to be quiet respect and moments of silence on that day. And with that, we look back at where we were and where we're going, and realize that MAINEiacs are resilient. MAINEiacs are good at what we do. We should be proud of what we've done, and we should be excited for the future of what's to come.
That's the quote of all quotes right there. That's awesome, sir. I do appreciate your time. I appreciate you sharing your story and your perspective of everything that happened 20 years ago on September 11th. And I encourage for those who are listening to this podcast to share this amongst your peers and your family and your coworkers and your subordinates, because it is a prideful, like the Colonel said, it's a somber moment, but it's a prideful moment to look back and see everything that we've done as a MAINEiac family. It's pretty awesome. So thank you for doing this, sir.
My pleasure.
And we'll talk again soon.
Thanks.
All right, sir. Colonel Gillis is one of many with unique 9/11 stories that will forever be engraved in the minds of those involved. Today is 9/11. Be sure to talk with your coworkers, your family, ask them where they were, ask them about their story. 20 years that followed that tragic day shaped who we are as MAINEiacs, a pivotal moment in our history. Like Colonel Gillis, there are those who knew the wing in two ways, pre and post. For others, like Senior Master Sergeant Dave Kempton, all he has known is the post era. And like most, he watched it unfold on the TV. Except he was in basic training at Lackland, entering the gateway to the Air Force with one mindset, and leaving the gateway to the Air Force with a different mindset. You can check out his story as well as others in our new Never Forget mini documentary. We released it September 10th, and I recommend that you go check that out. As always, be sure to take care of others and be sure to take care of yourself. Have a safe drill, and never forget